Welcome. Since July 2nd, 2025, the world has been talking about one thing, Triad Atlas. And for weeks, everyone stayed silent. Also, NASA stayed silent long time. Questions grew and answers never came. And in the middle of that silence, one voice stood out. Harvard's astrophysicist, Professor Avi Loeb. And until now, we have only discussed his statements from a distance. But today, for the first time here in Turkey, we will ask him our questions directly. So we are lucky, I can say, and especially about 3i Atlas, we have questions. Dear Professor Avi Loeb, welcome to my channel.
Thanks for having me. It's a great privilege to join you. I've never visited Turkey, but I would love to. I heard great things about it.
Thank you. Thank you. Professor, your comments about 3i Atlas got a lot of attention worldwide, and you said this object has unusual anomalies. So let me ask, what makes 3i Atlas unusual? I want to ask this.
So first of all, I should say the foundation of science is the humility to learn, not the arrogance of expertise. And this is the third object from outside the solar system that we discovered. There are only three, so there cannot be experts on interstellar objects. It just doesn't make any sense. So when people say, I'm a comet expert, therefore you should listen to me, you should not necessarily accept what they say, because they were trained on data sets from the solar system, comets, icebergs, and so forth. And this may be a completely different object. And when we check objects that arrived at our backyard, at home, from the street, they may not be only rocks. You might every now and then find a tennis ball that was thrown by a neighbor. So that's really why we should pay attention to anomalies of objects like 3i Atlas. We know they came out from the outside the solar system because they are moving too fast to be bound by gravity to the sun. And in fact, even when it passed within a relatively close distance to the sun, 3i Atlas was not deflected much because it was moving at 68 kilometers per second. That's 600 times faster than the fastest race car that we have here on Earth. And I know that because I was invited to a NASCAR car race where one of the racers put my image and the image of 3i Atlas on the hood of his car. And I told him, look, for me, it's a compliment, but not for 3i Atlas because it's moving so fast already. Doesn't really care that we put the image on a car. So what was special about 3i Atlas? Well, first of all, aside from its high speed, it was relatively bright and large, and at least a million times more massive than the first interstellar object that we discovered in 2017. And the question is, why were we so lucky that we got such a big package to our backyard as the third object? And then it was moving also in the plane of the planets around the sun within 5 degrees. And the chance of that happening at random is 1 in 500. So this immediately triggered my curiosity. A big object moving in the plane of the planets. First of all, I should say, even if it's a rock, it's a great gift that is quite rare, because all of our space assets, all the observatories that we have, are in this plane of the planets around the sun. Those on Earth, we have spacecraft around Mars, around Jupiter, and also spacecraft on their way to Jupiter. And so altogether, it's a great opportunity for us to learn about this object because it's bright and it moves for almost a year, available for us to look at it. And aside from the fact that it's in the plane of the planets, which suggests maybe it's a spacecraft on a reconnaissance mission, we also saw mostly nickel with very little iron in the gas plume around it, and that we find only in industrial production of nickel alloys. So that was surprising. There is also, even just yesterday, we had a new image from the Hubble Space Telescope that was released, and you can see that there is a plume of glow, a halo of glowing gas that is reflecting sunlight extended towards the sun. And that is an tail. Usually we see, for comets, we see a tail that is extended away from the sun because the radiation pressure or the solar wind from the sun is pushing particles of dust, particles of gas away from the sun. That's what we see in comets that are familiar. In this case, we see exactly the opposite, an anti-tail. So, for all these comet experts, they say it's a comet from a different environment, but it's still a natural object. Well, it's sort of like seeing an animal in your backyard and you say, well, it must be a street cat because it has a tail. But then you notice that the tail comes from its forehead, not from its back. And so you ask, what is this weird thing? And that's what I'm asking. I'm not saying it's necessarily not natural, but I'm saying, we should be prepared for a black swan event, meaning something that has a low probability, like this is alien technology, low probability. But if it happens to be alien technology because of the anomalies, it would have huge implications for humanity. And in the intelligence agencies, they often consider such events very seriously because, imagine you have a terrorist risk with a small probability, but huge implications to society, you would take it seriously. And so the same thing I say here, scientists are not used to that because they often stick to whatever seems to be most plausible. They discard completely a low probability event, but we must take it seriously because it's a visitor to our backyard.
We will talk about this more. NASA only commanded 3I Atlas after staying silent for a long time. We know, and other space agencies also were quiet too. So what's your take on this, considering the data we have,
right,
Professor?
So NASA in particular, the European Space Agency, ESA, was completely straightforward and released data as soon as they had it. Just a few days ago, they released data from the navigation camera of JUICE. That's a mission, a spacecraft that is on its way to Jupiter. And it came close to 3I Atlas after 3I Atlas passed close to the sun. And it took some data and immediately ESA released that data. The amazing thing is that 3I Atlas will get to Jupiter on March 16th, 2026. JUICE will get to Jupiter. It's also heading to Jupiter. It will get to Jupiter in 2031. And this just shows you how much faster is 3I Atlas relative to JUICE. Our own spacecraft, human-made spacecraft, will take until 2031 to get to Jupiter, whereas 3I Atlas will do it next year.
It was Lucy, right? Lucy.
JUICE. No, Lucy is another spacecraft that could also take data.
Yeah.
And JUICE is a Jupiter mission that already took some data and will transmit it to Earth by February because it's using the communication device as a sun shield right now. So anyway, so NASA, on the other hand, there was a government shutdown in the US, started on October 1st. And that was one day before the HiRISE camera, which is the best camera there is around Mars. It's on board the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter. And on October 2nd, the 3I Atlas came within 30 million kilometers, very close to Mars. So it had the best opportunity to get a high-resolution image. And it took a snapshot of 3I Atlas. But we didn't see that snapshot for about 45 days because of the US government shutdown. And my complaint is that NASA could have put the data in a repository so scientists can look at it. But then after that, the government shutdown was over, there was a press conference organized by NASA officials in which, everyone was anticipating to get some new information, but there was just fuzzy images that were shared, no new information. And there was no scientist that analyzed the data to talk about anything interesting, anything of substance. So altogether, I think the public was very disappointed. And, obviously the NASA officials make the case that we understand this object, 3I Atlas, it's just a comet that came from another environment. And I would have hoped that they would emphasize the anomalies. Okay, if it's a random walk, a random object that came on a random trajectory, why did it originate in the plane of the planets around the sun? Why is it so massive? Why does it have nickel with very little iron? Why does it have an anti-tail? and other features, at least mention those things that we don't understand, because it's an opportunity to justify why we're trying to get more data. But unfortunately, NASA displayed the arrogance of expertise. We know these objects. They are similar to comets in the solar system. It came from another environment. There is nothing really puzzling about its nature. And that was, to me, a missed opportunity to communicate with the public. I think a better approach is to admit what we don't understand and to explain that science is work in progress, that we are basically doing the work of a detective, collecting as much evidence as possible to figure out what's behind this object, what is the nature. And after NASA's press release, the press conference, there were many images taken by amateur astronomers with instruments that are only a few $1,000s compared to the billion-dollar instruments that NASA is using. And those provided much more information than you could obtain in the NASA press conference. There were jets coming from the objects out to 1 million kilometers away. And the fundamental question, are these jets produced by pockets of ice that are warmed by sunlight? Or maybe they are the result of thrusters associated with a technological spacecraft? So these are the kinds of questions that I hope we will resolve in the coming weeks.
Yeah, thank you. Professor, is there another date like October 29 that we should pay attention to?
Yes, December 19, that's when 3i Atlas will come closest to Earth. It will not be very close. It will be within a distance of over 270 million kilometers, but it will be a great opportunity for hundreds of telescopes around the globe to observe it. You can actually observe it right now. Anyone that is curious, in the early days when this object came along, some people had conspiracy theories that I'm talking about it in order to deflect attention from the Epstein files. And I said, look, you can buy a small telescope online and look at it. So actually, if you buy a telescope bigger than 20 centimeters in diameter, any telescope like that would allow you to see 3i Atlas right now, and it will just get better until we get to December 19th. That will be about a week before the holidays. And, my hope is that it's just an icy rock and it will not deliver any unwanted gifts to Earth for the holidays.
After your call, the United Nations, together with NASA, Russia, Europe, and China, launched and activated the International Asteroids Warning Network, IAWN. So how do you interpret this?
I'm very happy. My goal in talking about this subject is that we will get as much data as possible. Because one lesson that we learned from the experience of Galileo Galilei with the Vatican, the Vatican was not happy that he looked through his telescope and claimed that the Earth is not at the center of the solar system. And so they put him in house arrest. And, nowadays you can't do that. If there are lots of observatories around the world that can look at an object in the sky, you can't really suppress the information. It's impossible. And one way to avoid a situation like the Vatican had is to get as much data as possible, because if there are anomalies, if there is any clue that the object is technological, it will be impossible to deny it as long as you look up. If you assume that you know the answer, then obviously you will maintain your ignorance. That's what the Vatican wanted. But then, of course, in 1992, they admitted that Galileo was right, and that was 350 years after he died. That was a very bad public relations stunt, because it demonstrated that insisting on what happens in the sky, that you know what happens in the sky without actually checking, is bad practice.
Mm-hmm. Should we understand this as a sign of an existing risk or threat?
Yeah, so that's an excellent question, because we all know about the dinosaurs, non-avian dinosaurs that were killed by a giant asteroid, a rock the size of Manhattan Island, that collided with Earth 66 million years ago. And we are saying, we are smarter than the dinosaurs. We can build telescopes and by that know about incoming rocks, and because we can forecast their motion, and then we can deflect them and prevent them from hitting the Earth and causing a catastrophe. But all of that is in the context of rocks. And so, of course, there is a planetary defense initiative of NASA and other space agencies. And it's all about rocks, which we can forecast and we can catalog and so forth. But if we have an interstellar object, first of all, we don't have it in our catalog because it's something new that just arrived. Secondly, if it's alien technology, it could maneuver, it could have some intent, purpose for visiting us, and it could have technologies that are far better than what we possess. So in that case, it's a completely different situation. It's just like having a visitor to your backyard. And in order to decide how to respond to such a threat, because the visitor may come through your front door, you must first understand what is the intent of the visitor, what are the capabilities of the visitor, get as much data as possible. So I recommended to the United Nations to establish an organization, a committee or a body that will attend to all the future interstellar objects to decide if they might be technological or not, and then how to respond to them. And that organization should include scientists, it should include policymakers, but they were very reluctant to move to do something about this. And in my view, there will be a lot of action as soon as we have clear evidence for alien technology. Everything will change. And right now we are spending $2.4 trillion on military budgets worldwide. And I'm sure that once we recognize alien technology out there, that a significant fraction of that may be dedicated to defending the Earth, which means $1 trillion per year for space exploration. And it would be an international project because all of us are in the same boat. We are all vulnerable to that. So it will be a collaboration among all nations. So it will be one of these projects that unify all humans on Earth. And this is really my hope. I think it will have a big impact on the future of humanity.
Yeah. If there's something unusual or hidden, do you think it makes sense to share it, or what do you think is the best way to reveal such information?
Yeah, so anything that comes from outside the solar system, or actually beyond Earth, far beyond Earth, should be information shared by all humans, because it has nothing to do with the borders of nations that we put on this rock called Earth. Who cares? If they come from another star, they don't care how we split the land on this tiny rock. That's completely ridiculous to imagine that they care about nations here on Earth. So as a result, we all have to work together in response to such objects. And what we should also keep in mind that humanity existed only for a few million years. That's our history. And that is only one part in 1,000 of the age of the Earth. So if they started their journey, billions of years ago, they didn't even know that we exist. And if they visit the solar system, it might not be because of us. For example, 3I Atlas will be passing close to Jupiter on March 16, 2026, and it will come exactly at a distance where Jupiter's gravity dominates over the sun's gravity. And that is another anomaly. It comes exactly at that distance to within 4 significant digits. And maybe it's because the target for this visit is actually Jupiter. It's not the Earth. And that will be disappointing, of course, for us, because it's like being in a party where nobody wants to dance with you. I mean, maybe we are not the center of attention.
NASA spacecraft on Jupiter, as you said, will send new data in the coming period. So which could give us important signs? How significant do you think these findings might be? And could they help us understand objects like 3I Atlas or shed light on the early solar system?
We had a mission called OSIRIS-REx that delivered 120 grams of material from the surface of an asteroid called Bennu. And just recently, there was analysis of these materials over the past year that revealed that it contained, even though it was just a rock from the early solar system, it contained the building blocks of life. And that includes most of the amino acids that life is using, and also sugars. That was a very recent Nature paper, sugars that are used in DNA, RNA for the life as we know it. So what this means is that the building blocks of life are probably everywhere, and for me, the most fascinating prospect of having interstellar objects is if it turns out to be a rock, let's say 3I Atlas or objects like it's still very important because we can land on such an object, collect material, bring it back to Earth, and check whether the building blocks of life exist around other stars. That's a completely different approach to doing astrobiology, because the mainstream of astrobiology was focused on investing more than $10 billion in a big telescope within the next 2 decades in order to search for the molecular fingerprints of microbes in the atmospheres of planets around other stars. That's a very different approach, where you build a big enough telescope to look far away at the atmospheres of distant planets. And I'm saying, instead of looking far away remotely, we might be able to examine materials coming from other stars by taking advantage of these interstellar objects visiting us, like 3I Atlas. It took millions to billions of years for this object to arrive into the solar system from far away. So instead of us looking at those large distances, or trying to visit those stars that will take us millions or billions of years, here is a visitor that spent already the time. It comes close to us. We must take advantage of that. And the scientific community is not really aware of this opportunity. There is not much discussion about it. And I'm saying that will be a completely new window into exploring the universe, just physical objects that arrive to us from far away, and they bridge the distance.
Yeah. Dear Professor, there are many speculative claims circulating about 3I Atlas, suggesting unknown structures or biological entities inside. From a scientific perspective, how can we determine whether a signal comes from an artificial or biological source?
Yes, so for example, if we see jets coming from the objects, we can measure the speed of the gas in those jets and the composition of the gas in those jets. And if the jets originate from pockets of ice on the surface of a rock, the speed will not be larger than the thermal speed of the gas, which is hundreds of meters per second. So, and the composition will be typical of volatiles, ices that we find in comets. And so we should see that. However, if we see a speed that is a few kilometers per second or tens of kilometers per second, that would be indicative of something technological, because that's what we employ in rockets, in ion thrusters, and maybe alien thrusters would be even more powerful than that. So there is a way of telling. And other signatures include, for example, if we detect artificial lights coming from the object that are not just the reflection of sunlight, that could be indicative of technology. If we see excess heat coming from an engine, the Webb telescope is sensitive to infrared radiation, and that's heat. So if we see much more heat coming from the object than we expect from the reflection of sunlight, then that could be a technological signature. There was a claim that 3I Atlas, when it came close to the sun, was actually bluer than the sun. And blue means hot, or it could be molecules that emit in the blue. We don't know why, but it's an example. If we were to see 3I Atlas behaving or having a hot spot that is unexplained, it could be a signature of an engine. And of course, if we can see maneuvering, if it maneuvers, that would be a flag of some means of propulsion.
Professor, what is the worst case scenario?
Yeah, the worst case, there is no signature that 3I Atlas is maneuvering significantly. We see non-gravitational acceleration, but it's small corrections to its course. The worst scenario that I can imagine is one in which it releases a lot of small devices, probes, that if it's technological, and those arrive to Earth, they arrive to Mars, they arrive to Jupiter because it's passing near these planets. It didn't pass close to Earth. It was actually on the opposite side of the sun when it came closest to the sun. So the sun was between us and the 3I Atlas, perhaps for a reason. So we can't really see what it's doing. But if it released any probes that are on their way to Earth. They may arrive within the coming months. It arrived at a retrograde trajectory, which is opposite to the motion of planets around the sun. So that's ideal for releasing devices that will meet the planets as they come towards those probes. And so the worst case scenario is that we will end up realizing that there are some devices that arrive close to Earth, and then the question is what to do about them if they happen to be very sophisticated technological devices that we cannot really compete with.
Yeah. Professor, you often talk about science should be transparent. If 3i Atlas carried something truly extraordinary, do you think authorities would reveal it, or will the world hear it from the scientists like you first?
I think it will come from scientists because there is no way nowadays to hide the information if everyone can observe it. So obviously, if it's challenging to observe it, that's one situation where whoever gets the information will hide it. But in the case of 3i Atlas, as I said, even amateur astronomers can observe it with a telescope bigger than 20 centimeters in diameter. So a lot of people, there were already about 5,000 data points about 3i Atlas, and from 230 observatories around the world. So there is no way to suppress this information. However, it may take more time for people who do not have access to the best telescopes to figure out that there is something really strange going on, like, for example, small objects showing up. But eventually, I think all of us will know about it with respect to objects like 3i Atlas, because those are there is a lot of attention to them. There is a separate question about unidentified objects that the US government talked about, and there was recently a documentary called The Age of Disclosure. And I just had an interview on television just an hour ago about that. And, it's really, there are objects that the intelligence agencies are noticing that they cannot figure out. And this means that they're not doing their job. Because if these objects belong to adversarial nations, then of course it's a national security risk. But if those objects were observed 50 years ago, this information should not be classified, because who cares what adversarial nations used 50 years ago? Now the technology is very different. So my hope is, if there was anything unusual discovered over the past 50 years, and some of it a long time ago, that scientists like myself will have access to it. So we can figure it out. We can help the governments figure it out. I hope the subject will open up to scientific inquiry, because right now, it's very convenient for the government to say, oh, these are unreasonable claims, and therefore we don't need to release anything. But if it becomes a mainstream scientific subject where the government might decide to release that data, and then we can all look at that and decide what it means. And maybe, it's not just in the last 50 years. Maybe, who knows, if you go back to the time of the Egyptians, maybe they had some access to materials that came from elsewhere. And we just don't know. The documented human history is only 6,000 years old. And such visits could have happened a long time ago on Earth. And we are just not aware of them.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor. In your book, Extraterrestrial, you discuss the possibility of intelligent life in a scientific way. And another guest on my program, Oxford's cosmologist, dear Jude Carlin, has spoken about her own extraterrestrial experiences, and which naturally draws attention when coming from a scientist, So when we consider anomalies like 3i Atlas, how do you scientifically interpret such explanations?
Yeah, so I think various interpretations should stay on the table. We should not say we know in advance the answer, because then we might miss opportunity to learn something important. And what it should encourage us to do is to collect as much data as possible so we can rule out possibilities. And, that's the way a detective works. We know of many people that were convicted of crimes when they actually didn't do the crime. And the reason is because some detectives are motivated to resolve the case without actually collecting enough evidence to figure out what really happened. And then when DNA tests come, those people, some of which were on death row, were exonerated. And that just shows us that we should not jump into premature conclusions. We should always maintain our curiosity and open-mindedness. And unfortunately, many of the experts, want us to give up on our curiosity, and I just don't like that. And I feel that when I spoke to the public in recent months, it actually encouraged a lot of young kids to become scientists. I get a lot of these email messages from parents who tell me that after listening to me on television or on podcasts, their kid, their daughter or their son decided to become a scientist. Because as long as we realize that scientists are motivated by curiosity, that's a perfect way to maintain your childhood interests and not to pretend to be the adult in the room.
Yeah. And I'm surprised and I'm excited for December 19th. And can I go on vacation for
till December 19th?
I think for now, based on what we know, you shouldn't worry. But of course, you might want to check that you don't need to worry. And that's what I will do.
Really? Thank you. And Professor Loeb, before we close, is there anything you would like to say, especially to our Turkish audience?
Yeah, especially for the young people, I have two types of advice. One is you can become a scientist and by that have a profession, get paid to stay curious. And that's a wonderful thing. It's a privilege. And the second thing is, don't believe any content that you get from artificial intelligence, AI. It's much better to have human friends than AI companions. I just had the experience of someone generating videos with AI that are completely fake, that look like me, speak like me, and some people were fooled by that. And I complained about it to YouTube, and they removed one channel after me, and now someone else put another channel. And it's really a dangerous territory where in the future, even scientists like myself, which are talking about the physical reality based on facts, you would find content that distorts this message and will include misinformation. And so we should all be careful about that, especially young kids, not to believe things that you find online. Have a critical mind. It's always important to use your brain, not to rely on artificial intelligence, rely on your natural intelligence, because that's the only way by which we can make progress and not consume intellectual junk food that these computers are giving us. So I very much hope that the young generation of today will know to distinguish between what is truth and what is fake, what is human and what is AI generated. And we will have a much better future if all of us will do it.
Yeah, thank you. This kind warning. I saw this channel and I couldn't believe my eyes. Yeah, dear Professor, 3i Atlas has reminded us of something essential. As you said, science is not a comfort zone. It's the courage to pursue truth. So showing that courage, Professor, I thank and congratulate you. Thank you once again for joining us today. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks for having me. And I just wanted to close with the words of Salvador Dali, the painter, who said that intelligence without ambition is a bird without wings. So we really need to be ambitious. It's not enough to show that you are smart or that you do some intellectual gymnastics the way you find many people in academia doing. It's important to be ambitious and bring humanity to a better place. And I very much hope that we will be in a better place in the coming years.
Yeah, Professor Avi Loeb, thank you again. And we hope to welcome you back again here. Thank you.
It will be my great pleasure. Thank you.